All right. We are live. Hello. Welcome. I hope you are all doing well. I'm just getting some stuff situated here. We got a lot of stories to talk about. As always, you can support this channel by going to patreon.com. Please do that. Go take care of that. I appreciate that. And you can always go to friendlyatheist.com to subscribe to the newsletter, which is free. And I appreciate that as well. We have Den, who is helping me out with moderation. If you have questions, comments, anything, leave them in the YouTube comment section. Den will show me in between all the stories. And I've already done a spider check. There's nothing. We should be good. Just FYI, for anyone watching from the beginning right now, for the next 2 weeks, because of some personal things, I will probably be doing this live stream on Wednesday night for the next 2 weeks. So hopefully I will see you then. And let's go ahead and let me pull this up and we'll get started here. I wanted to talk about this Senate race that is happening in Texas right now. This is a race for U.S. Senate. And in case you're not familiar with the dynamics of the race right now, on the Democratic side, you have two people who are really battling it out for the Democratic nomination. And we'll talk about them in a second. On the Republican side, you have the incumbent Senator John Cornyn, who is old. He is boring as far as, on the scale of how often are you on TV and interesting to, you might as well be gone. No one would notice. John Cornyn is very boring and forgettable, but he is very strongly conservative. You also have Ken Paxton, who's the Attorney General of Texas, who is a guy who is about as awful a human as you could find. He's not just a bad person. I mean, he's the sort of guy who Republicans don't like because he makes them look bad. Republicans tried to impeach Ken Paxton in Texas, and it made it through one of the chambers of the legislature. Ken Paxton's wife divorced him on biblical grounds, and we don't even know the full details of that one. Everyone who works with this guy says he's wildly corrupt. But because he is a diehard MAGA sort of person, he may win that primary, which honestly, that would be great news for Democrats because maybe you have a chance of beating someone that odious. On the Democratic side, you have Jasmine Crockett, who I love, who is outspoken and this progressive Black woman. She's fantastic. Her theory of the case is she's going to excite Democrats. And that's what you need in a place like Texas. And if you just excite enough of them, you will beat a Republican. I don't know how true that is. You also have a guy named James Tallarico, who is the guy I want to talk to you about today. James Tallarico is also he's a state representative. And I'll tell you about him a little more in a bit. But his theory is, I think I can win over Democrats because I'm progressive. But also, I think I can win over a lot of moderates and non-voters and even some Republicans too. And maybe that's what you need in Texas. And normally I would say I don't like that theory. I don't like someone who's appealing to all sides. I want someone who is progressive enough that they alienate everybody else. But honestly, Tallarico's wearing me down. I like this guy a lot. So just to give you an idea about this guy, there's James Tallarico right there. He's 36. He is very progressive. He is a Christian. He's a seminarian. I don't actually know if he's done with seminary, but that's his background. He's like just a very nice, righteous. I keep imagining that guy from 30 Rock, the NBC page. Every time I see him, just you seem very likable and nice. And right now, the polling suggests that Tallarico is in a dead heat with Jasmine Crockett. That primary is about a month from today, so it'll be very interesting. Kenneth is the NBC page. So that's the state of affairs right now in Texas. And the reason I bring all this up is because one thing James Tallarico is really good at is he is not just willing to go on progressive talk radio or podcasts or whatever for short interviews. And he's very good at those. He will go on Joe Rogan and talk for hours. And Joe Rogan comes away very impressed by this guy, which I know it's Joe Rogan, but like that sort of endorsement means something to the sort of people Jasmine Crockett would never reach. So that goes a long way. To that end, James Tallarico also sat down with like the opposite of Joe Rogan, which is a very boring podcast hosted by James Carville and Al Hunt, two very old school political strategists on the Democratic side. But I want to play you a clip from their interview because Tallarico talked about how important it is to live up to the actual message of Jesus and not what Republicans like to pretend that message is. Let me play it for you, and then we'll talk about it because Republicans really do not like what he said.
So, like I said, I'm not living up to the radical teachings of Jesus Christ. But I do think that 2,000 years later, he is still pushing us to be better neighbors, to look out for the poor, the marginalized, the oppressed, the vulnerable, to stand up to powerful people. You know, we oftentimes think of Jesus as this really nice, polite, gentle person, which he was, of course. But when people were hurting his neighbors, he walked into the seat of power and he flipped over the tables of injustice. That was a powerful example of nonviolent direct action, protest. And it's what got him killed. The Roman Empire didn't kill Jesus for being a nice guy. He was a threat to their wealth and their power. And so, again, that should unsettle us in the wealthiest country in the world. We should be asking ourselves, what does it mean to truly follow these teachings? Are we really looking out for the least of these? And I think when you look at our current government, you look at our current society, the answer is a resounding no. So instead of putting the 10 Commandments in every classroom, instead of forcing school children to read the Bible against their wills, why don't we, all of us, look inward and figure out how we can be more Christ-like, even when it's uncomfortable?
And that applies to Muslims and Hindus. And
Listen,
Jews
I have.
This is, they can learn a lot from Jesus.
I have met so many Hindus, Buddhists, Sikh, Jews, Muslims, atheists, agnostics who are more Christ-like than some of the Christians I serve with in the Texas legislature. It is about how you treat other people. Matthew 25 tells us exactly how we're going to be judged and how we're going to be saved. By feeding the hungry, by healing the sick, by welcoming the stranger, which is more timely now than it's ever been before. There's nothing in Matthew 25 about reading your Bible. There's nothing about going to church. There's nothing about being a good Christian. It is all about how you treat other people. And so I've met a lot of people from different faith traditions, people who aren't religious at all, who embody that teaching better than some of the really loud Christians that we have in public office.
So I like that guy. Again, could I use less God talk? Yeah, personally, I could. It would be nice if politicians didn't constantly sound like pastors. But when they're talking about God and Jesus like that, because James Tallarico is very much supportive of church-state separation, and when you have a guy who can speak comfortably about faith in a way that doesn't sound condescending, but sounds very much like your religion doesn't sound scary. I don't mind it when you talk about God that way. I actually think politically in Texas, certainly, that is a huge asset. I mean, it's very easy to cast off certain liberals as if they're godless. They don't understand our values. And of course, all of that is overblown. But you can't say that about someone like Tallarico, who talks about God everywhere he goes. So I think that is a political asset that he has going for him. You may recall that in Texas, when they were trying to pass legislation, trying to get the 10 Commandments in public school classrooms across the state, Tallarico is one of the guys who during committee hearings would ask the Republican sponsors of these bills things like, so the 10 Commandments, we're supposed to rest on the Sabbath. Do we work on the Sabbath in this legislature? Or he would say, thou shalt not kill is one of the commandments. Don't we have the death penalty in Texas? Like, he's very much for calling out religious hypocrisy everywhere he goes. And I love that. And what he said about the importance of acting like Jesus really isn't controversial. It's the sort of message I would think in bizarro world, the sane world that we don't live in right now. I think a lot of pastors would be like, we need more talk like this, because this is a politician making their religion look good. which is the opposite of what is happening right now. But Texas Republicans cannot handle that. They do not know how to attack Tallarico because he doesn't look or sound threatening. You can't break out the racist playbook like you use against Jasmine Crockett or even Beto O'Rourke or Colin Allred. You can't break out the you're not from here, you're not a real Texan or whatever. So what do you do to go after this guy? Before I show you the next thing, I do want to tell you, at one point, someone asked James Tallarico, I forgot what the reference, what the context was, but is God male or female? And I think he said something like, I think God is non-binary. I don't think God is segregated to one gender or another. God is beyond that. Okay, fine. Look at this headline from Fox after that segment I just showed you aired. Texas Democrat who said God is non-binary now says atheists are more Christ-like than Christian colleagues. It's such a bad headline. He didn't say atheists were more Christ-like than his Christian colleagues. Nuance is important here. He said he's met many non-Christians, yes, atheists included, who are more Christ-like than some of the Christians he serves with in the legislature. And that nuance matters. He is not throwing his own religion under the bus, as much as I wish he were elevating atheists. He's not even doing that. He is not ranking any of these groups. But when you look at that actual article from Fox, one of the funniest things I saw in there came from one of their spokespeople. This is RNC spokesperson Zach Kraft. And let me show you this line right here. Here we go. Look at this. James Tallarico has once again broken out his anti-Christian shtick. There isn't a woke cause that he won't claim to find buried in the Bible. Twisting Christian principles to promote woke talking points might play well with coastal elites in New York and California, but he's going to learn real quick that won't fly in Texas. I hope you all like my Texas accent. It's such a funny line, partly because, okay, there isn't a woke cause that he won't claim to find buried in the Bible. Who do you think takes the Bible out of context more? Is it Tallarico or is it everyone who spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast this morning? What else do they have here? Twisting Christian principles to promote woke talking points might play well with coastal elites. No, it wouldn't. You think coastal elites, the people you, Fox, say are godless all the time, you think they're going to be like, you know what we love? Bible verses. No, it doesn't matter what the Christian principles are. Usually, people don't want to hear anything about religion. I mean, that's what Fox says about coastal elites. And the thing is, I think it would fly in Texas because there are a lot of Christians in Texas. And I think they're really sick of how their religion is only ever being used for cruel purposes. I mean, just look at what Republicans in Texas do with their power. It's never, let's help the people who are poor and starving. It's always, which group of people can we hurt the most, the fastest, right? So you got to love how hard they're trying to make Tallarico look bad, which is just ridiculous. Also, this is how you know they don't have a playbook against Tallarico. That guy's skin color is like practically that of a pale Norwegian, and they have no clue what to do with that. No one has said Tallarico is anti-Christian. Look at some of the messages online that Tallarico got from this. This is from another RNC person. What on earth? Oh, who was this? This was a Republican staffer, Sarah Gallagher. What on earth? What a slap in the face to Christians everywhere. Why? Why is saying Jesus wants us to help the least of these? Why is the Sermon on the Mount a slap in the face to Christians everywhere? If Jesus came back, these people would just see brown skin and call on him to be deported. There was another one. This is from more of a Republican rando, but like these are responses they got. They love putting Christians down, talking about this conversation. Or this one. one of many counterfeit Christians. Just my opinion. Many agree with me. What are you people talking about? How is he the counterfeit Christian? He seems perfectly normal. Like, if that's your takeaway from what Tallarico said, it's because you don't have reading or listening comprehension. Tallarico is not bashing Christians. He is a Christian. He is doing what conservative Christian pastors do all the time, which is taking a stand for what he believes his faith represents. And then he's calling out the people who choose to distort his faith for personal or political gain. The difference is Tallarico can actually back it up. By the way, the funniest thing about that Fox News piece, I have to show you the last line in the entire article. Check this out right here. Fox News Digital reached out to Tallarico's campaign for additional comment Friday. I get that that's what you're supposed to do if you're a real journalist, but like, what is it that you want comment on? They took a quotation, a long quotation, out of context, basically made him to look like a boogeyman. And I'm just wondering, what did they email his campaign to ask? Hey, do you actually believe Jesus was a nice guy? How dare you? I don't know what they were seeking additional comment for, but glad he didn't respond to that. In any case, I mean, I think this is why Tallarico is so dangerous in Texas. He is, to me, he is a lot like Tim Walz in the sense that he is a not weird, total normie white Christian who can speak very comfortably about his faith in a way that even people like me don't find offensive. Like, do I wish he didn't talk about religion? Yeah, sure. I mean, like, you're a politician, go do your job. However, if that's what it takes to help Democrats win Texas, listen, I will hand out Bibles at your rally if that's what it takes in Texas. They can't revert. Republicans cannot do Islamophobia against him. They can't do racism. They can't pretend he's not Christian, though they're clearly trying. And I don't think they know how someone like him can quote scripture so effortlessly in a way to defend people who are oppressed instead of using it to attack them. They also can't pretend he's a decent dude because, again, Kenneth from 30 Rock, what the hell? I mean, I think this guy represents a version of Christianity we could use a hell of a lot more of. Not because I think he's right, but man, like, if you want to defeat Christian nationalism, we need more guys like him who can sincerely talk about faith in a way that's not problematic. Because I think that's going to be more effective than atheists like me trying to do it. So anyway, if you're in Texas, please consider supporting Tallarico in the primary. And then, I don't know, tell your worst enemies to go vote for Ken Paxton on the Republican side. I'll pause there for now. What questions we got here? I'm leery of Democrats like this turning out to be turncoats like Kirsten Sinema or John Fetterman. Jasmine Crockett is solid. So this is interesting. I am also leery of people who sound like they're progressive, like Sinema did at one point, like John Fetterman did at one point, and then they become just corrupt right-wing hacks once they enter office. I will say I have no reason to think Tallarico or Crockett would be a turncoat on this stuff because I don't think they're just saying talking points someone handed to them. I think they very much do believe what they're saying. And I think Jasmine Crockett is very badass about, you know what? Screw Republicans. I'm not doing this for them. And I'm not courting their votes. I am progressive and I'm going to fight for progressive values. And I love that about her. Like, normally my heart would be with her on this one. But Tallarico also to me seems like the real deal. Yes, politician. Yes, Christian. But not in a way that's going to hurt. He's not going to like go after trans people. He's not going after LGBTQ people. If he does, by all means, we will pile on. However, I will also say this about John Fetterman, who I am not a fan of right now. John Fetterman was still a better option than Dr. Oz in that Senate race. If I lived in Pennsylvania, I still would vote for Fetterman over Dr. Oz or another Republican. But if there's a primary anytime soon, I'll vote for whoever's not Fetterman. So I'm not worried about like Tallarico becoming a turncoat. This is where he may go wrong. Religious people are going to stick to their subcult branch and pastor. He can get tied up arguing imaginary goalposts with people who aren't ever voting for him. That's a fair point. I don't think he's worried about trying to win those people over. I mean, I think he believes, and I will admit, I think he's right about this. There are a lot of Christians in Texas who are very much not part of some MAGA cult. I think it's a total waste of time to try to convert the people who are in that cult. Don't worry about them. If they are MAGA hat wearing Trump voters, you're not going to waste any time trying to argue with them. Don't bother. But I think there are a lot more non-voting people. Beto O'Rourke said this. Texas is not a blue state or a red state. It's a non-voting state. Tallarico could excite a lot of those people because he doesn't seem crazy. He could also win over a lot of moderate Republicans. I know it's a shrinking number, but I do think he has an appeal that goes beyond Jasmine Crockett. And the interesting thing is, if you're a diehard progressive, I would include myself in that bunch. I'm happy to vote for whoever wins that Democratic primary. But if you're trying to reach people you might not otherwise be able to get, I think Tallarico has a bigger ceiling there. I think he can find more votes that Crockett's never going to be able to access. And for that reason, strategically, I think he has a better shot if he can make it past the primary, even though I love Crockett. Texas is not red. Texas is rigged. Absolutely true. And this is why, it's such a hard state. But Beto O'Rourke lost it by 3 points against Ted Cruz. If Ken Paxton is the Republican nominee, Democrats have a fighting chance because enough people don't like him. So that's the argument. I agree. It's rigged. It is a state where a lot of people don't vote. But if anything can get people to vote when they don't normally do it, it's got to be a time like this when everything feels like it's hitting the fan. So get him out there. I want to see this. I want to see Tallarico campaigning. I want to see him campaigning when he has a very specific opponent that he's going after. I think that could be a real race. They have to make Tallarico look bad because he makes them look horrendous. He does. And you know how he makes them look horrendous? He quotes them. He just shows you what they're doing. It makes them look bad. That's all it takes. Who is that on the left looking like part of the couch? I think you were talking about the video when he's talking to James Carville, and the guy on the left is Al Hunt, who is another old school Democratic political strategist. I think he's Democratic, but just an old school strategist. That's it. I don't have anything bad to say about him. Paxton is, was he part of January 6th? Wasn't he? Paxton doesn't go anywhere. Paxton just kind of stays in Texas and causes harm with a pen, doing lawsuits. He's the attorney general. He can make your life bad that way. I don't think he would have shown up on January 6th. I'm sure he did everything he could as attorney general to help people who were found guilty, convicted of anything on January 6th. Anything else? He was at the rally before the riot. Was he? That is surprising to me, but who wasn't at this point? It's very much like the Epstein files. At this point, I'm more surprised by someone whose name isn't in there. So, all right, he was at the rally, and then he wisely stayed away from the riot because, even he knows that's stupid. All right, let me jump to a different story. Give me a second here. All right. Okay. Here's a fascinating story out of New Hampshire. And I will admit, I don't think I've seen a lot of press covering this particular story, but New Hampshire Republicans, a handful of them, have just proposed a constitutional amendment to their state constitution that would elevate Christianity above all other religions. And it would make it very possible for public schools to basically shut out non-Christians from even teaching. And that's why I'm surprised this is going under the radar. This seems like a bigger deal, even the fact that they're proposing it. And it all goes back to the state constitution. So let me show you this right here. This is Part 1, Article 6 of the New Hampshire Constitution. And they have this one clause right up front called the Morality and Piety Clause. And just read this one with me, because there's nothing all that surprising in here. It's actually pretty straightforward. I'm just scrolling to see, what do they have here? The several parishes, bodies, corporate, or religious societies shall at all times have the right of electing their own teachers. Yeah, that makes sense. Religious organizations can choose their own leaders. That sounds totally sensible. What else? No person shall ever be compelled to pay toward the support of schools of any sect or denomination. Yeah, taxpayers should not have to fund religious schools. That makes sense too. And every person, denomination, or sect shall be equally under the protection of the law. Right. We're all equal under the law. It doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are. None of that is weird. None of that is weird. So that is this part in the Constitution. It basically mirrors what the US Constitution says. But there's one interesting thing here. Look at what it says right underneath. It says this section of the Constitution was adopted June 2nd, 1784. However, look at the line underneath it. It was amended in 1968 to remove obsolete sectarian references. There we go. And I just want you to think about that for a second. The thing I just read you up there, that's the new version of the article. It's totally fine. It's not controversial, but there was a different version. And the reason I bring that up is because the original version was much more blunt about how much Christianity needed to be a part of public life. The old version, the 1700s version, said, among other things, that local jurisdictions could use public dollars to support Christian preachers. It said public school teachers could be elected. And it did have a clause banning religious discrimination under the law. However, that rule only applied to Christianity. You could be like Methodist or Presbyterian, and the government is not going to say one is better than the other, as long as you're Christian. Like, that's what the original version said. And I guess that made some sense in a country where non-Christians were essentially non-existent. But in any case, Article 6 did not age well. That's why they needed to amend it. That's why they corrected it in 1960, 68. Like, of course it should be illegal to prop up Christianity over other religions, or even faith over non-faith. And it's stupid to say we should elect teachers. Like, we should let public school districts do their own non-discriminatory hiring based on their qualifications and the district's needs. And of course, religious discrimination is wrong regardless of your beliefs, right? Well, apparently not, because some Republicans think this bit needs to change. So this is what we now have. If I can find this here we go. This right here is the proposed amendment, CACR 28. And they are saying, in the year of our Lord, 2026, what do they want to do? They want a constitutional amendment that would change that entire part of the Constitution to be replaced with this whole section right over here. And it's long. I'm not reading all of it, but simply put, it would revert Article 6 back to the original version. The version where Christianity is given special privilege. The one where towns get to elect their teachers. That's why this is disturbing. Among other things on this, let me pull this back up here. On this list of things in the original version, it says morality is centered around evangelical principles. This version calls for the public worship of God or the deity. It requires public instruction on morality, which basically means taxpayer-funded support for Christianity. Like I said, it allows the legislature to force towns to support Christian preachers. It allows towns to elect their teachers, which would take that authority away from school districts. It only protects Christians under the law, not non-Christians. And this is kind of amazing too. Right? Look at line 16 and 17. Every denomination of Christians demeaning themselves quietly and as good subjects of the state shall be equally under the protection of the law. So you're only a good Christian as long as you're quiet, not a protester. That would be bad. As long as you're quiet and a good subject, we won't discriminate against you. That sounds really bad. My favorite thing about this entire bill is because it's a proposed constitutional amendment, they need to have a section that says what voters are going to be told. So look at line 32 here. Here's what they want to say in the voter's guide. At the present time, towns, parishes, bodies, corporate, and religious societies do not have a constitutional right to elect their own public teachers. That is true, because that's dumb. And every denomination of Christian does not have additional religious protections under the Constitution beyond those granted to other religions. Yeah, that's how it works, dog. These people think that Christians should have more protection under the law than all the other religions. And here, look at what they say. If this amendment is adopted, then towns can elect their own public school teachers, and every denomination of Christian shall be granted additional religious protections under the Constitution. That is not okay. None of that flies with the actual First Amendment, how we interpret the U.S. Constitution. That's quite literally calling for theocracy, and it's scary. So when this bill was first proposed, trying to pull this up here, back in like December, before it got any traction, let me show you what one Democrat said about it. Look above here. A group of Republicans, this is from Peter Petrigno, who is a New Hampshire state representative. A group of Republican state representatives have filed legislation to amend the state constitution, which in effect would transform New Hampshire into an evangelical Christian theocracy. The bill, CACR 28, calls for the support and maintenance of public Protestant teachers of piety, religion, and morality. Now, here's the good news. I doubt seriously this will have any traction. Nonetheless, this kind of extremism is out there and very dangerous. Their ultimate objective is to have everyone fall in line with their narrowly focused religious perspective. I happen to agree with all of that. Like, I don't think this will pass. I don't think this will become a law, but sometimes the messaging is the point. By even suggesting this become a constitutional amendment, these Republicans are saying, yeah, this is what Christianity stands for. We know our place as government officials, and we think we need a theocracy. And they're sending that message to their base, letting them know this is okay. So what I'm hoping for, I want more people to speak out against this, even if it seems ludicrous. And I also want them to point out that equality, Republicans in New Hampshire do not want equality. They want preferential treatment for Christians. Because this sort of litmus test, are you a good Christian or a bad Christian? Are you a Christian or a non-Christian? All of that goes against everything in the U.S. Constitution. It's not religious freedom. It's certainly not what you expect in the live free or die state. And even if the sponsors know that this proposal is going to fail, they're still trying to normalize the idea that religious dominance is just part of our country. I mean, that's why this should be rejected forcefully. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We'll see where this goes. I do know that this week, maybe Wednesday of February 4th, there was a session where they were discussing this bill and people spoke out against it. A lot of people spoke out against it. but we'll see what the lawmakers do with it. And I will pause there for now. What questions we got? New Hampshire is one of the least religious states in the country. Just shows how insidious the political right is. You are absolutely correct right there. So, how do you run for office as a teacher? That is a great question. Teachers can run for office. You just got to do all the paperwork, go to run for something, whatever website you want to go to if you're a good progressive, and go run. And you don't have to run for Congress. You can run for school board. You could run for city council. What is so upsetting is there are so many smart people I have so much respect for, and every time they doubt themselves being electable. But the dumbest right-wingers I know are like, I'm totally going to win this race. And they always run, and some of them win, and it's infuriating. All right, jump into another story. Give me a minute here. Ooh, I know. Not connected to that. Jeopardy just had its Tournament of Champions, and the guy who won is this legendary crossword guy who everyone in the crossword world knows. Just a really good guy. It was cool to see him win that. All right, let's go back to Texas. We still got to talk about Texas because Texas is on the verge of forcing children to read the Bible in school. And the way they're going about making this happen is I'm debating whether it's genius or just evil, pure evil. You decide which one it is. But basically, the State Board of Education recently expressed support for a plan that would make certain Bible passages and stories part of a larger required reading curriculum. So the idea here is Texas is saying at every grade level, from kindergarten through 12th grade, there are certain books that kids ought to read. And they decided, we don't actually have a list, though. Usually the school district decides what books they read. But Texas is saying, we need a bare minimum. We need a baseline approach to this. And so they tried to put together a list of the literary canon you need to read as a good, well-rounded public school student. Now, some of the stuff on the list makes sense. For example, kindergarten teachers, they would have to read aloud books like The Cat in the Hat and various nursery rhymes. That makes sense. Sixth graders, they have to read The Miracle Worker about Helen Keller. They would have to read S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders. In high school, you got to read The Great Gatsby and the Scarlet Letter. But here's the problem. Included in the mix are a lot of Bible stories. And this is how the Houston Chronicle put it. Also included are 3 Bible-infused readings drawn from the state's controversial Blue Bonnet learning curriculum. The Golden Rule in kindergarten, The Parable of the Prodigal Son in 1st grade, and The Road to Damascus in 3rd grade. Okay, that seems weird and unnecessary, but this is what they do. If you look at the proposal, they have this list of stuff, and you can look on the far left here. It says what grade? Kindergarten. And what books do you read? You can see the titles next to it. You got Blueberries for Sal, Cat in the Hat, Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. Those are books a lot of kids read, and you have to, the teachers on the far right here, you could see right here, they have to read aloud those books to them. Totally fine. Nothing weird about that. But as you go down the list, look right above my head here. It says The Golden Rule. Who's the author? The state of Texas. That seems odd. But this is what they're doing. They're just kind of working it in there. And you might think, okay, why is the Golden Rule such a bad thing? Because all it says is basically treat others the way you want to be treated. There's nothing proselytizy about that, right? But here's the thing. Let's talk about the Golden Rule specifically, because the Bluebonnet curriculum, which is a already Bible-infused curriculum that Texas dangled in front of public school districts. And they said, if you use this curriculum, we'll give you money for your school district. So a lot of poor districts were like, I guess we'll use the Christian curriculum. And I think a quarter of Texas public schools now use this Bible curriculum. Well, for the golden rule, you would be using that curriculum, and look at how they do this. I pulled this from their website. Here's the section on the golden rule for kindergartners. Okay, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Nothing weird about that. But then you keep reading. And then check this out. I'm going to scroll down here for a second. Here's how they describe the golden rule, which, by the way, is not a Jesus original. It existed long before Christianity. But look at how they describe it. Several books of the Christian Bible describe a man who lived a long time ago, nearly 2,000 years ago, in a part of the world that is very far from here. The man was named Jesus. One of the books of the Bible describes Jesus giving a talk atop a small mountain. During this talk, he wanted to share some very important lessons. Who needs grammar? Important lessons is one word now. So he climbed the mountain and spoke to a group of people who were gathered to hear him. The talks Jesus gave were called sermons. What does any of this have to do with the golden rule? Why are we doing all this? We don't need all this. And then it just goes on. Because Jesus shared the Sermon up on a mountain, it's called the Sermon on the Mount. He said a lot of things during the Sermon on the Mount, none of which Republicans follow. And then they get to the golden rule. And then it's fine. Now they're just giving examples of it. But do you see what they're doing here? That's supposed to be an innocuous lesson for kindergartners, but they're using the golden rule as a way to shove a Bible message into the curriculum. Because if you want to learn about the golden rule, apparently, you have to understand the Sermon on the Mount. And if you want to know about the Sermon on the Mount, you have to understand who Jesus was. That's the game they are playing with all of these passages. It's not enough to just say, treat others nicely. You got to have a Jesus tie-in. And this is how this lesson is being used as a Trojan horse for more direct proselytizing. So back to that Houston Chronicle article, this is what they said about it. 10 excerpts from the Old and New Testaments are dispersed throughout, including the Shepherd's Psalm for 7th graders. I think that's the one that starts as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And the 8 Beatitudes from the book of Matthew in the 8th grade. Also included are 3 Bible-infused readings drawn from Bluebonnet. Oh, that's the one we said already. But yeah, this is what they are trying to do. And here's the more disturbing thing, even beyond all this. Do you remember there was a recent Supreme Court ruling that basically said if you don't want your kids learning about something in school because it violates your religious beliefs, you have the right to remove them from class? Well, you would think, does that apply over here? And the answer is yes. However, there might be a danger if you remove your kids from any of these Bible lessons. Though parents would likely be able to opt their children out of reading religious texts, the reading list will become part of Texas's English standards and therefore used to write standardized tests, which could make the readings unavoidable, critics said. This list represents another step by the state toward turning public schools into Sunday schools that undermine the right of parents to direct the religious education of their own children, said a director of the Texas Freedom Network. So that is the danger with all of this. You want to see something else disturbing? One of the school board members who had to vote on this, look at what he said about it. Brandon Hall. Today, the Texas State Board of Education will vote on a proposal to add Bible passages to a required reading list for K-12 students across the state. Look at this. This would bring the Word of God back into schools in a meaningful way for the first time in decades. We need prayer warriors to intercede for this one. This would bring the Word of God back into school. He's making it clear. Brandon Hall is making it clear. The goal here is to put the Bible back in school, not to help students learn how to read. He's giving away the game by saying the stupid stuff out loud. Like, you're not supposed to say that one. By the way, the Bible was never removed from public school anyway. That's just a right-wing lie. Anyone can read the Bible in school if they want to. That's not a real problem. So, I will say it is possible that that long reading list changes between now and when they finally vote on it, which is going to happen in several weeks. And the reason I say that is because these are supposed to be books every grade across the state is supposed to read, but there are like 30 or 40 books on the list for every grade. There is no time to read all of these books in school. So they got to cull the list down. Otherwise, no one's going to be able to do any of it. And then you'll have teachers picking and choosing what to read, which means no one's going to read the Bible. So we will see what they decide to do about this, because they do have to edit the list down. And I don't necessarily know if all the Bible readings make the cut. We'll see about it. One last thing I got to say about this. I do think there is value in learning about a lot of these Bible stories. I think if you don't know the story of Adam and Eve, you're going to miss out on a lot of literary pop culture references in your life. And I think there is a secular way you could teach the story of Adam and Eve to kids in a way that is actually helpful. But that is not what this curriculum is doing. They very much, and even the board member said so, they very much want to indoctrinate kids. They want them to believe the Bible. That's why Texans need to object to this, call their school board members, make sure this doesn't pass, because what they're trying to do about this is really disturbing. So here's where we're at now. The board last week voted to push back a decision on this until April. So there's some time for the required reading assignments to change, and maybe the Bible passages go away entirely. But I don't know that that's going to happen, so we'll see. Let us stop there for now. What questions we got here? Well, I hate that. I don't want my daughter. I don't want my daughter reading any religious texts without my careful oversight. Just kidding. If I can get her to read a book, I am for it. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I think there are a lot of parents who would say, I don't have a problem with my kid learning about what the story of the prodigal son means. Why? Because it's a good reference. They should know some of these stories. I don't think parents are aware what the real purpose is behind any of this. They don't know that this is part of a larger scheme to convert their children. And that's what they need to know. That's what Republicans are trying to do here. Nothing surprising here. Some same dumb boilerplate proselytizing they try in our public schools every year. They do the same thing, sprinkling their literature in our healthcare facilities. Yeah, I believe that too. We're seeing it happen at the White House right now, where they shove the Bible into everything they do while doing nothing that Jesus would do. So not surprising they would do that in Texas as well. They don't understand the meaning of secular. Oh, Republicans don't read. They don't know the meaning of a lot of words. I guess their reasoning is you can be different, but you have to learn about our religion so you can be more like us. What? Yeah, I don't know if you're joking or not, but you're very right. Like, you can be different. Of course you can be Muslim as long as you are trained to be a good Christian. Like, that's their little game. This is neither here nor there, but is anyone else getting their towns covered in those obnoxious Jesus save signs everywhere? I'm so sick of it. You know what? I have not seen them in my town, but the Super Bowl is this weekend, and they are going to have more of those "He Gets Us" ads. I'll talk about that more next week, but it's like that $100 million campaign blitz to get people to just believe in Jesus. And it's the biggest waste of money ever, but you're going to see more of those Jesus commercials during the Super Bowl. Did you hear about Richard Dawkins in the Epstein files? Can I tell you something? I was trying to put together a whole thing about who's in there in our world, the Lawrence Krauss of it all. And I know I talked about Lawrence Krauss after they dumped the first batch of the Epstein files a few weeks ago. But the latest batch has even more stuff about Lawrence Krauss asking Epstein for advice on how to handle the sexual harassment allegations against him. Lawrence Krauss is not a good dude. Dawkins is in there too, but I don't know the extent that Dawkins is in there, other than Epstein really liked getting in with like science educators and communicators and giving them money. So, like, not only did he have politicians in his pocket, not only did he have powerful billionaires in his pocket, as we know, but he also had like credible people who could vouch for him. And he would give them money to fund their little projects and stuff. Like, that's how he was able to make entree into these worlds. So Lawrence Krauss loved this dude. Steven Pinker loved this dude. Name the Harvard educator. They were all. I just saw an article that Lisa Randall, who's like a theoretical physicist or something, was caught up and like went to the island or something. She's like, I didn't do anything there, but like he tried giving us money. Or it's wild how many well-known scientists are in there. Doesn't necessarily mean they did anything that Trump is being accused of, but they definitely cozied up to this dude. And even after they should have known that Epstein was a bad guy, years after all that, they were still very close to him. And that should be very disturbing too. Penn Jillette. I did not see Gillette in there. What's that one about? You're going to have to send me a link to that one. I did enjoy, there's a website, Jmail, kind of like Gmail. But if you Google it, Jmail, they make it very easy to search through all the Jeffrey Epstein files as if you were searching through your Gmail. So look up Jmail. It's an easy way to search for all the names you're looking for. I am not on the list. Just saying. I feel like the answer is going to be, oh, that's not what I thought. I thought it was 83. I do enjoy the comment saying, congrats on not being on the list. It's all I've ever wanted. Thank you. Okay. Let us talk about this woman named Kimberly Ann Polk. So in 2020, Kimberly, she applied to be a substitute teacher in the Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland. And if you've never been a substitute teacher, basically you go to the school district and say, hi, I want to be a substitute teacher. I have maybe a bachelor's degree in something, and I have no criminal record. And they basically say, are you sure about that? And they do a background check. And for the most part, that's really all it takes to be a substitute teacher. And then there's probably, depends on the district, but there might be a number or a website. You log in the morning, you see if there is any need for a substitute teacher, and there always is in a big school district. And you could say, I'll take that one. Or maybe the school requests you because they know you. And that's kind of how the whole substitute teaching system works. You show up, there's a human adult body in the classroom. Great. Okay. So Kimberly applies to be a substitute teacher in 2020. And in 2021, she was hired. And basically the understanding is you might be asked to fill in at any school in the district, whether it's a elementary school or a high school or whatever. And she did the job. As far as I know, no bad reviews, no performance issues. I mean, she stood there and did the job, right? Fine, good. So then we begin the 2022-23 school year, and she wants to be a substitute teacher again. That's fine. And the district says, great, there's some like online procedural stuff. You got to go through a few basic, like, did you read the policy manual? Do you understand what the expectations are? Nothing weird about that. One of the things is, are you familiar with the board policies? And do you sign off? I read them. I agree with them, like the terms and conditions of the school district. And she's reading through them, and she comes across this one right here for the school district. Names and pronouns. Let's look at this one specifically. All students have the right to be referred to by their identified name and or pronoun. School staff members should address students by the name and pronoun corresponding to the gender identity that is consistently asserted at school. Students are not required to change their permanent student records, as described in the next section, as a prerequisite to being addressed by the name and pronoun that corresponds to their identified name. To the extent possible and consistent with these guidelines, school personnel will make efforts to maintain the confidentiality of the student's transgender status. So that's a really good policy from this school district, basically saying, hey, to all of our staff and substitute teachers, if you have a student who says, I go by this name, this is my pronoun, just call them that. That's called basic respect. And also, if you find out about that, you do not tell their parents about it. Why? Not because you're trying to hide something, but because that very much could lead to like an abusive situation at home. It is not your place to do that. That is not some sort of situation where mandated reporting is necessary. If a kid says, I go by this name and this pronoun, just do it. It's a very good policy. So anyway, Kimberly sees that and she's like, I'm not signing this policy. Why? Because she says, I have sincerely held religious beliefs based on my understanding of Christianity and the Holy Bible. Of course, that's the reason. Why not, right? Because the school board said you should treat children with respect. And she's like, no, I love Jesus. I don't like kids. That's why she wants to be a substitute teacher. So then she says, can you give me some sort of religious accommodation to all this? And one district administrator, some staffer, said, okay, we could try. Maybe we just have you teach at like the elementary school level where you're probably not going to have kids who ask you to use a certain pronoun because those kids don't even know what the hell a pronoun is. And she was almost okay with that. But then later on, the district comes back to her and says, no, we are not playing that game. You are a substitute teacher. You are going to go to whatever school we need you to go to. We're not going to restrict you to just elementary schools or anything like that. So then, because of her refusal to treat trans kids with respect, she did not work as a sub that year or the following year. Instead, in May of 2024, she sued the school district. She basically claimed they violated her civil rights by not granting her religious accommodation and impeding her right to free speech and free exercise of religion. And somehow, this case, for, every legal case like this has its little quirks, but this ends up in front of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and a 3-judge panel there recently ruled against Kimberly. And the decision is glorious, mostly because you could tell the majority, the 2 judges in the panel, they really don't like this woman. This is how the Washington Post described it in an article. Check this out. In the majority ruling, the appeals court said that no one forced you to become a substitute teacher in Montgomery County, and added that by accepting her position, she agreed to follow policies set by the school board. Be it choosing curriculum or placing administrative requirements on how teachers deliver that curriculum, those decisions are entrusted to the board, not to judges. And it is the school board, not individual teachers, which is democratically responsive. If, as Polk says, teachers and parents disagree with the guidelines, then democratic means exist to address their concerns. Basically saying, if you don't like the policy, go vote out the school board. Go run for school board. But if you don't like the policy, don't sue. That's the wrong response. They run the school district. You have to listen to what they say. And if you don't like it, vote them out. That seems to me to be a very fair response. But the other thing I really enjoyed about the decision here, look at what they say here on page 21 of the decision. I'll pull this up here. This paragraph is great. Instead, Polk maintains that because religious individuals will be impacted, the guidelines are not neutral. Whoa, Let me try that one more time. I think I just pushed a weird button somewhere. There we go. But that contention skirts the nuance of the issue. That is, because Polk herself is a Christian who believes that there are only two sexes, does not mean that all Christians believe that same thing and that non-Christians inherently believe otherwise. Indeed, there are multiple secular reasons why other persons, regardless of their religious background or creed, could take issue with the guidelines. So they're basically saying, we're not giving you a religious accommodation because your religion doesn't say treat certain people like crap. We know that because there are plenty of Christians who don't and plenty of non-Christians who do. So it's not a religious thing. There's no evidence of religious discrimination. Also, you chose to work in the school district. So of course you got to abide by their policies. If you don't like their policies, go be a sub at a private Christian school. They need subs too. That's fine. For now, all you're doing by complaining is saying you cannot do the job. I mean, as far as free speech goes, that's a dumb argument too, because as soon as you walk into the classroom, teachers don't have free speech rights where you could say whatever you want. There are rules. Ask anyone who's been in a workplace. It doesn't matter what the workplace is. There are rules that you got to follow when you are there. So if she doesn't like the school board policies, go run in the next election or support conservative Christian candidates on the ballot. My favorite thing about the entire ruling, though, and this may be the greatest thing in the entire... Here we go. We readily decline Polk's invitation to run the public schools. I hate that that's hidden in the middle of their decision, but this lady is telling us how she would run the school district. Well, guess what? We decline your invitation to run the public schools. The school board runs the schools. The school board sets the policies. You got to follow their policies. How's that for a mic drop moment? I love that. Now, that was a 2-1 decision. There was a dissenting judge, the only Republican appointee, who said her free speech rights were violated, and the school district could totally have accommodated her by saying things like, just use students' last names instead. Which, no, that's not how normal people talk to their students. But look at this paragraph from the dissenting Republican judge, because this one is wild. If the majority's reasoning is correct, then there is no limit to the words the state can put in teachers' mouths. Teachers become, for all intents and purposes, the state's anointed messengers. Are we now to allow states to mandate that teachers voice opinions contrary to their own without any First Amendment protection whatsoever? Can the state force an Israeli teacher to wear a pro-Palestine pin? Can the state force a Quaker math teacher to start class with a statement expressing her support for the U.S. military strikes abroad? Can the state force an atheist teacher to recite the Pledge of Allegiance with the words "under God"? It goes on for a while. And the answer is no, of course they can't. Because telling teachers they got to make a political stance, take a political stance on a topic, of course it's not acceptable for school boards to make teachers do that. But telling teachers they should respect their students' preferred names and pronouns is not a political statement unless you're an asshole who thinks basic civility is political. If you think treating people with decency is a political statement, that's a you problem. That's not a school district problem. So, I appreciate this decision. It's a welcome one, especially in the face of all the right-wing outrage over all things transgender. Here is a victory that says a Christian teacher, substitute teacher, has no right to misgender kids because her religion, her Christian faith, requires her to be an asshole at all times. Her lawyer, Polk's lawyer, said they're going to appeal this again, maybe to the Supreme Court. Which I don't know. I don't know that this is the best test case if you want to overturn it. But I am thinking that her lawyer said this about a year or two ago when she filed the lawsuit. Claybrook said the lawsuit boils down to the school district saying they don't want anyone with traditional religious beliefs, certainly beliefs that the parents are the ones to make important life decisions for their minor children, to be working at the school. That's very troubling. No, the school district did not say we're not going to work with anyone who has traditional religious beliefs. I'm sure this school district, the Montgomery County School District, has plenty of Christian teachers. I'm sure they have plenty of conservative Christian teachers, but all teachers are obligated to respect their students. Don't use your classroom to spread your, whatever your religious beliefs are. That applies to everybody. The same rules apply to everybody, and this lady can't handle it because the rules said don't be an asshole in class. And she's like, but I'm Christian, so I should be allowed to. So I'm glad she lost. I mean, this isn't about religious liberty. This isn't about government overreach. It's just another demand from a conservative Christian who thinks her prejudice ought to be affirmed by the government at all times. The district never demanded that she agree that trans people are people, or that she has to stop being Christian when she enters the school. She could read her Bible during lunch period or whatever. All she has to do is the bare minimum, and she refuses to do it. And then she's demanding that the school district give her this job that she clearly cannot do. Like, no teacher has the right to make a child's school day more painful because their religion calls on them to do that. I mean, she can't do the job. She shouldn't have the job. You don't sue over that. You just find a different job. That's it. All right, I will stop there with this one. What questions we got here? That may come off as political, but honestly, teachers are too busy to do background checks and private investigations on students. Call them by how they introduce themselves and teach. And you know what? When I was in the classroom for several years, it's like the first thing you do. It says Michael Smith on the roster. What do I call you? Oh, you go by Mikey? Got it. Done. Like, it's not a big deal when it's a straight kid. And if someone says, hey, I use she, her pronouns, I'll make a note of it if I don't think it's obvious to me so I can learn better. And then I teach. And then I do whatever the hell I'm getting paid to do. That's how it works. It's honestly the amount of things Christians are suing over that normal people just handle is unbelievable. Kim Davis is like, yeah, I'm the county clerk, but you want me to sign a certificate on a marriage license, even though that's literally my job? But they're gay and I don't like them, so I don't wanna. Or like, what was the Hobby Lobby case back in the day? I have to sign papers saying we're not going to provide Obamacare to our employees or something like that. I don't want to sign paper that says that violates my religion. Like, these people will pretend anything is a violation of their faith, even though they don't even have to. You can bend over backwards to accommodate them. It's never going to be good enough, because as long as this school district treats trans children like people, Christians are going to complain about it, conservative ones. So that's why you don't give them any inch. Just, no, you can't. If you can't do the job, if you can't treat kids with respect, you can't work here. Are we sure this Kim's last name isn't Davis? How many times has she been married? You know what's interesting? I was trying to look up who this Kimberly Polk is. And I didn't look that hard. I couldn't find that much information on her despite this lawsuit making it to the appellate court. Like, there were no articles about her that I found. I couldn't find pictures of her. Again, I didn't try very hard, but it's weird that none of them came up on like the first page of even Google results and stuff like that. So I don't know much about her. I'm very curious. I don't know how often your gender shows up in school other than quiet down, guys. Mr. or Miss is for formality and discipline. No kidding. Just with my own situation talking to students, just tell me what you want me to call you. Great. Done. And then you move on. It's not that hard, I swear. I'm working with a school board member to try to get a rule in our district about training teachers about LGBTQ safety, like confidentiality, because they don't at the moment. Well, thank you for doing that. And I hope you're able to persuade your school board member friend to do it. That's a really important thing. I'm really glad to see this school district in Maryland was able to do it. But yeah, these sort of policies should be in place everywhere. Ireland have a guy doing similar. Sort of a trans student came out. Principal told staff to use the name pronoun. Teacher shouting and stuff got suspended. He claims discrimination. Oh, so that's happening in Ireland already. I hope that dude loses too. Because why? Why are you making life worse for trans people? It's hard enough. Trump announces May 17th ceremony to rededicate America to God. That is correct. He announced that at the National Prayer Breakfast this morning. I will be honest, I've been out all day. I have not seen the specifics about that, but I did see the headline. I don't even know what that means. And honestly, by May 17th, who knows how many more people his government's going to murder by then? So I don't even know what that means anymore. All right, jump into another story. Okay. Let me show you this picture right here. This is outside. You could see right there, Boston City Hall. They have 3 flags. They have 3 flagpoles outside the building. One of those is the United States flag. Another one is the state of Massachusetts flag. That's the second one. And I believe this one right here, the third flag, that is the Boston City flag. But in Boston, a few years ago, they said anyone can use this flagpole. Anyone can make a request to hoist their flag up there. And years ago, a Christian man said, I want to fly the Christian flag up there. Then the Christian flag, I will show you right here if you're not familiar with it. But a guy said, I want to fly this Christian flag on the pole. And that was in 2017. The city said no to him. Harold Shurtleff, that's the Christian guy's name, he sued. That case made its way all the way to the Supreme Court. And in 2022, the Supreme Court said Boston has no right to exclude religious groups from the open forum they have created. If Boston officials say that third flagpole, anyone can put up a flag here, but you can't put up a religious flag or you can't put up a political flag. The Supreme Court said you're not allowed to put restrictions like that on it. And the city had to pay over $2 million in legal fees. And the weird thing about all of that, when that case happened, is that Boston could have avoided all of the consequences if they just closed the forum. Just say the third flagpole, we're putting up the city of Boston's flag and we're done. No one gets to put up whatever the hell they want to. Officials could just say they control which flags go up instead of allowing third parties to do it. Or, you know what? They could just remove the third flagpole. They could have done any of that stuff. They did not. And it caused all this chaos. But what they didn't anticipate is that a non-Christian group would want the exact same things. And this is where it gets fun, because the day after the Supreme Court said, you have to put up that Christian flag, you can't have some policy that says no to it, the day after the Supreme Court ruled that way, the Satanic Temple jumped in. And this is, look at the date line on this first, May 3rd, 2022. This is right after the Supreme Court decision. The Satanic Temple replies to the Supreme Court ruling that found Boston violated First Amendment rights by refusing to fly a Christian flag at City Hall Plaza. And how are they replying to it? Well, they filled out the application for Satanic Appreciation Week. They want to raise and later lower the flag. And they asked for it like 2 months after that decision. So glorious, glorious. By the way, in case you're wondering, what does the satanic flag look like? I was not familiar. Satanists had a flag. Here is what the satanic flag looks like. Look at it. Look at how pretty it is. Can I say something? I saw this image in the lawsuit that we will talk about in a second, and I genuinely don't know if the actual flag is black and white or if that's just the way it appeared in the document. But I do like the idea that it's just black and white because it makes me laugh. But that's the satanic flag that they wanted to fly on the pole in Boston. And as soon as they applied for it, guess what Boston said? The Supreme Court ruled on it. Boston learned their lesson. Open forum. Everyone gets to play the game. And Boston said, yes, correct? No, of course not. Boston saw the Satanic Temple's application and said, nope, we are putting a hold on all flag raisings until we could figure out what to do to comply with the Supreme Court ruling, which might be fine. But then, to that end, a couple months later, check this out. This is from April, I believe, of 2022. No, I lied. This is a couple months later, summer of 2022. Look at what the city of Boston did. They passed a new amendment here. And check out what this says. A lot of whereas clauses, but they're basically saying we have flagpoles. The Supreme Court said we lost. It is important that the city of Boston be able to express its solidarity with people who have come to Boston from other nations. Yeah. And this is important. Look at this one at the top here. For these expressions of official city sentiment to be clearly construed by the residents of Boston, it is also important to clearly demarcate and codify that the city's flagpoles are not intended to serve as a forum for free expression by the public. So, closing the forum. Okay, no one gets to put up a flag. They said one other thing here. They said, what is allowed on that third flagpole now that it represents the city's perspective? Well, flags of governments recognized by the United States. Flags displayed in conjunction with official events or ceremonies, as announced by mayoral proclamation or city council resolution. Flags of professional sports teams. Why not? And ownership of other flags. The city will own all the flags it flies in place of the city of Boston flag. Okay, fine. So no more open forum. The city gets to decide which flags go up, and only a few of them are allowed. I mean, that makes sense. As long as everyone's treated equally, that sounds fine, right? Christian flags don't get to go up. Satanic flags don't get to go up. As long as we're on an equal playing field. Well, guess what happened right after that decision, that new policy was put forth? Here's the headline from the Associated Press. After a Supreme Court battle, Christian flag flies briefly over Boston. What the hell? What's going on there? This is a day after they announced their new policy. The city of Boston flew the Christian flag for like a couple of hours. Now, why did they do it? I think it's like a concession. We lost the Supreme Court case. You are allowed to put your flag up. Go have fun. Go do it. The guy did it. And then he took it down a couple hours later because he got a symbolic victory. And then Boston's thinking, okay, new policy goes into effect now. But here's the thing. The Satanic Temple made this request before that new policy went into effect, and they were told no. And also, in the year since then, because that was mid-2022, the city has put up other third-party flags with no proclamations or city council resolutions. So what the hell? Even the city doesn't appear to be following its own policy now. And then the Satanic Temple said, hi, we want to file a public records request. We want everything you have written to people or gotten emails about regarding flags from like the day the Supreme Court decision happened to like now. And the city stonewalled them for a really long time. And they were not responding. And eventually when they responded, they said, we don't have any records about flag requests. Which is a weird thing to say because the Satanic Temple is like, we know you do have stuff about flag requests because we made one of those flag requests. So at the very least, our application should have come up in your search. So here's where we're at. The city of Boston said no to the satanic flag while putting up a Christian flag. They had a flagpole application process on their website, which the Satanic Temple filled out, but officials said there were no records of any of that happening. Like, at that point, it's just gaslighting. And for all those reasons, the city of Boston decided to sue. The Satanic Temple decided to sue the city of Boston last April. And this is what they said at the time. If I could show you this from the Satanic Temple's website. Shortly after announcing that all future flags would represent the city's official speech, Boston raised a Christian flag. The city hasn't explained how this Christian flag meets the new criteria while simultaneously denying the Satanic Temple's request. When the Satanists filed the public records request to investigate the flagpole approval process, Boston claimed that no applications existed, including the one the Satanists submitted through the city's website. This denial is unlawful under Massachusetts law, which requires the disclosure of existing public records. The Supreme Court clearly mandated Boston end viewpoint discrimination in its flagpole program. However, the city disregarded the ruling and continued to exclude religious perspectives it disapproves of. The Satanic Temple's lawsuit aims to remind Boston that compliance with constitutional law is not optional. Yeah, makes sense, right? So, Satanic Temple sues. After all this happens, the city of Boston responds and says, "Hey, judge, can you throw this lawsuit out? It's dumb, right? It's totally dumb." They said their new flag policy is consistent with the law. They said they only flew the Christian flag as a court-ordered remedy under the old flag-raising policy. And they said that the brief flag raising of the Christian flag happened before the new policy went into effect, and they don't have any public records to share because the city did not accept applications once it shut down the old flag flying scheme, which is not true because the Satanists filled it out and pushed send, and it went through. I would also say the Satanic Temple not only sued the city of Boston, they sued the mayor, Michelle Wu. She has since been removed from the lawsuit because the judge said, "You're just suing the city. You don't need to be redundant and sue the mayor." Okay. So the Satanists came back to the court and said, "No, don't toss out our lawsuit." They said their application was filed when the public forum existed, that denying their application violated their First Amendment rights. They said raising the Christian flag as a court-ordered remedy doesn't mean the city gets to say no to the Satanists, and that not responding to our public records request is a game of semantics. And now, the reason I bring all this up is because the court has now weighed in on this matter. This is U.S. District Judge Angel Kelly. And Angel Kelly, the judge, basically said, "Oh, this lawsuit's definitely moving forward. I am not tossing it out." Didn't rule on the merits. Didn't say the Satanists are making a good point, but just said, "I think there's something to this, and I'm not just going to toss it out because the city of Boston is asking me to." There is no document here. It's just an electronic okay. But basically, the judge said the Satanic Temple plausibly alleged that the Satanic Temple plausibly alleged that in the days following the Supreme Court's opinion, raising a flag on the Boston city flagpole remained public expression rather than government speech. The Satanists also plausibly alleged that the city didn't fly their flag because of their values or views, that the city showed a preference for the Christian group, and that the city closed their flagpole to stop expression of disapproved viewpoints. And also, hey, city, you got to respond to their public record request. So the judge is not tossing out this lawsuit. It is still moving forward. It does not mean the Satanists are going to win, but it means right now, Boston was hoping this would get tossed out, and it's not. I asked the Satanic Temple about it. Like, what do you think about what the judge said? And the spokesperson for the Satanic Temple, Lucian Greaves, this is what he told me. This means the Satanic Temple's lawsuit now moves into the discovery phase, where the city will be required to produce documents and evidence under oath. So that's exciting. He also added, the failure on the part of Boston to get the case dismissed bodes well for an outcome in our favor, as we do not foresee any disputes of fact during the litigation. The facts are clear, unambiguous, and verifiable. The city of Boston clearly discriminated against the Satanic Temple. So that's the good news. We will see how this goes. I don't know how this lawsuit ends. I still don't understand why the city of Boston is doing this to themselves. All you have to do is take down the third flagpole, or just put up the Boston flag on the flagpole and call it a day and don't touch it. That's all you got to do. Like, the city is creating this chaos, doesn't have the policies they need to make it work, and they just keep getting sued over it. And they've already lost once. It cost them over $2 million. And it looks like there's a possibility they'll lose this one too, all because of a reason I still haven't been able to figure out. Why are they so insistent on keeping that third flagpole open so anyone can file an application to put up their flag? It doesn't make any sense. So just really dumb decision all around, but I love that the Satanic Temple is fighting it here. All right, I will stop there with this one. What other questions we got? It is black and white, the Satanic flag. Excellent. Glad to hear it. That makes me laugh. At a glance, I would think it was that back the blue nonsense. Right. It is perfect. Yeah, it's definitely not one of those types of flags. So yeah. Can I ask why they violated First Amendment rights? I know I sound like an idiot, but I never get any of this in the UK. It's just not a thing. Are you talking about the city of Boston? I mean, if the city of Boston is saying a Christian flag could go up on a city-owned flagpole because anyone can apply and anyone can request it, but then you say no to a different religious group, it's easy to think you're okay with Christian beliefs, but you're not okay with satanic beliefs. And that is religious discrimination. And US law says you're not allowed to do that if you're the government. So I think that's what you're talking about. That's what the Satanic Temple is alleging. But as I said in the last story, that's also what the Christian substitute teacher is alleging. You want me to respect students, but that means you're harming Christians. It's like, no, that's not a sincerely held belief where you just get to treat everyone like a jerk when you're an employee of the school district. But by refusing the Satanic Temple, refusing them their right to fly the flag, is the city breaking the law? Is that the question? I mean, yes. If you're saying a Christian group can put up their flag, but the Satanists cannot, yes, they're violating the law. That's the Satanic Temple's argument. The city says we don't have that sort of open forum anymore. That's a question for the judge to figure out. Is it really an open forum? Is it really closed like the city says it is? Because even when it's closed, they clearly put up the Christian flag. No one knows what's going on. Boston's dumb. What are they doing? I love the city. Why are their elected officials doing this? Michelle Wu's like a good progressive too. I don't know what the hell's going on. A lesbian couple won the homecoming court at my old college, so leadership decided there would no longer be a homecoming court, ending a 50-year tradition because of the extremists who ruined it. Don't you love it when people take advantage of a thing that's been going on forever, and so the only legal response is let's just shut the whole thing down. No one gets to have any fun if a couple people we don't like get excited by it. Are you Indian? Every time people ask the questions like this, I'm like, that's got to be a racist question, right? But I am Indian. It's not a Hindu name. I was not a Christian before. I've talked about it in older videos. Grew up Jain, Jain, different religion, not Hinduism, but born and raised in the United States. Didn't even immigrate here. My parents were immigrants, though. All right, jump into another story. I got a couple more for you here. One more legal one, but then one that I think you're really gonna enjoy that's not legal, technically. I got one. Yay. Okay. Somehow, there is another state trying to file a 10 Commandments bill to put up posters in public school classrooms. And I feel like every time we talk about this story, I have to give you a rundown of where we are at. Like Louisiana passed a law to put up 10 Commandments in schools. They were sued. A judge said no. They appealed, but that's one case. Texas tried to do it. They were sued over it. They lost. That case got appealed. And basically, the Texas and Louisiana cases were just heard by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in January. So we're waiting for the appellate court to weigh in on what is clearly an unconstitutional thing. And I think the state of Arkansas also tried to pass a law to do this. They got sued. They lost. Everyone is just waiting to see what the appellate court is going to say now. So that's kind of the position we are all in right now. It's totally unconstitutional. The people who want the 10 Commandments posters to go up are pretending it's for secular reasons, and nobody's buying that argument whatsoever. So with that in mind, in South Carolina, they are now considering a bill to post the 10 Commandments in every classroom. And I want to show you this bill because it makes no sense at all. This is just the official page in the legislature. It's slow going. Like right now, it's just been introduced and it's in committee. But this bill, they don't have a nice PDF of it either. They just have a really ugly version of it on their state's website. But this bill, it's H4762. It has two parts. I'm not going to read all this because tiny font, etc. There are two parts to this bill. The first part would allow volunteer chaplains in public schools, which, whatever, as long as it's open to everybody, like we are talking about in the last story, fine. But that would open the door to potentially having satanic chaplains and humanist chaplains, which could be interesting. But the second part of the bill would require the 10 Commandments to go up in every classroom on a poster that is 11 inches by 14 inches at least. And it says this is for secular reasons because the 10 Commandments are, quote, part of our state and national history, culture, and tradition. And they very much lay out which version of the 10 Commandments they want right here. Like, that's the version they want to see. And it's the King James translation of it. I'm not going to go through all this because I've gone through it in previous videos before. One thing that is very interesting in this particular lawsuit, I want to show you two things. This part right here. Look at number 3. Recognizing, I know it's tiny font, that's why I'm reading it, but we'll go through it. Recognizing the historical role of the 10 Commandments accords with our nation's history and faithfully reflects the understanding of the founders of our nation with respect to the necessity of civic morality to a functional self-government. And listen to this. History records that James Madison, the 4th president of the United States of America, stated that, quote, "We have staked the whole future of our new nation upon the capacity of each of ourselves to govern ourselves according to the moral principles of the 10 Commandments." And let's just pause there for a moment. James Madison said that? Really? Where? Americans United for Separation of Church and State looked into that one. Check out what they said. History, like they quote the thing that I just read you right up there. James Madison never said that. There's one glaring problem. Madison never said it. This fake quote has been circulating for years. Scholars at the University of Virginia, where many of Madison's papers are kept, searched diligently, but found no evidence that Madison ever said or wrote anything like it. That's not surprising. The quote simply doesn't jibe with Madison's well-known advocacy of separation of church and state. So the reason South Carolina used this quotation is because in Louisiana, when they were trying to get the 10 Commandments up there, the Christian geniuses who wrote that bill, they included the fake verse. it got debunked, and South Carolina, which has not learned anything since these lawsuits began, was like, let's just copy paste. We're good. That law was good. And they ended up pasting a fake quote from James Madison. That's how dumb these people are. There's another thing I got to show you in their bill, which is they really try to make the argument that the Ten Commandments is secular. And this is how they do it. Look at the history of the Ten Commandments in American public education. I'm not going to read all this, but what they say is the Ten Commandments were a prominent part of American public education for almost 3 centuries. And they say from 1688, the New England Primer became the first published American textbook, and it had more than 40 questions about the Ten Commandments. What about the famous McGuffey reader? That was used in public schools back in the day, used since the 1800s. That one, the Ten Commandments were included in there as well. And then this last thing says Noah Webster wrote textbooks, and his textbook contained the Ten Commandments and sold so many copies. So basically they're arguing, look, this isn't a religious thing. This is a part of public schools. It's always been a part of public schools, and therefore we should be allowed to do it. But there are a lot of problems with all this. Here's what's wrong with the South Carolina bill. Some of it is very much the same as we have seen from the other states that do this. First, the South Carolina bill says you can, if you want to, also put up posters of the Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, the Northwest Ordinance. You might, if you want to. It doesn't require schools to do it. So this bill says you have to put up the Christian part, but it's optional if you want to put up the other stuff. That's one reason it's about pushing Christianity. Also, I do think it's weird that the same people who want to ban books with gay characters are like, you know what, we need to teach kindergartners not to have sex with their neighbors' manservants or whatever. They want kids to know about adultery from kindergarten. That doesn't make any sense. What about the thing I just told you about the McGuffey reader and all that stuff? Well, guess what? All of that is fake too. Here's the thing. The New England Primer was used in religious schools, not in public schools. So who cares what they had in their books? The McGuffey reader, that had versions of it, did have stories about the Ten Commandments, but others don't. And it's definitely not a part of the famous McGuffey reader. There's not one version of it that everyone used. Some editions had some stories about commandments as a moral teaching. The other one, Noah Webster's textbooks, there is no evidence of any of that happening as well. When lawyers in Louisiana tried to fight against the Louisiana law, when lawyers for church-state separation groups fought this in Louisiana, what they said is that there is no evidence of a long-standing, let alone unbroken, historical acceptance and practice of widespread, permanent displays of the Ten Commandments in public schools. The reason the law cites some old textbooks used before America became religiously diverse and before we adopted public education and before we even knew how evolution worked is because that's the only history they have to justify what they're trying to do. And the textbooks, by the way, did not call for posting the Ten Commandments in the classrooms. The Ten Commandments were not even significant in the textbooks that the Christians are using to justify their case. So they weren't prominent. They were not in public schools. The Ten Commandments were not on the walls. So all those disclaimers that this is part of history means nothing. The other thing I got to show you about the South Carolina bill that is ridiculous is this bit right at the top, number 5. It says the text of the Ten Commandments is identical to the text of the Ten Commandments monument that was upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States in Van Orden versus Perry, 2005. Well, that's a weird thing to mention there. They're saying our version that we want in classrooms is cool because the Supreme Court said a Ten Commandments monument in Texas was legal outside the Capitol there, and we're just copying that monument's text right there. But the thing about Van Orden versus Perry is that the Supreme Court said that monument was legal only because outside the Texas Capitol, there are a lot of monuments, not just the Christian one. They have other monuments that have other historical, legal wordings. So they have monuments dedicated to secular things too. And the Supreme Court said, listen, if it was just the Christian monument, it would totally be illegal. But because it's part of a broader display, we'll let it slide. And so for South Carolina to say, see, it's the same text, therefore we want to just put up the Christian version of the Ten Commandments. No, not the same thing. Not a good legal argument at all. So here's where we're at with the South Carolina bill. It was somehow approved by the South Carolina State House Judiciary Committee on an 18-3 vote. So that's frustrating because that means even some Democrats decided to advance this bill. That's frustrating. The full state house is going to have to vote on it soon. Honestly, it's hard for me to imagine that any of these legal or ethical concerns are going to stop Republicans from passing it. Like, why start now? I will say that there are some people who are calling this stuff out. Look at this from a local news article. The Reverend Gary Linsky, director of the Basilica of St. Peter in Columbia, said he supports bringing faith into the public square, but questions how much impact a mandated classroom display would have. I am not convinced that a bill bringing the Ten Commandments into our schools is necessarily going to change the underlying fabric of belief. Yeah, he's right. Opponents, however, argue the other side. What does this opponent say from the ACLU of South Carolina? Our public schools shouldn't be places where one religion is prioritized over another. Our schools are meant for education, not indoctrination. And Courtney Thomas said she believes the measure is likely to face the same legal obstacles seen in other states, calling it a waste of time. I happen to think she is right. I think any judge could be like, everyone else is getting sued over this and they've already lost. So you're going to lose too while we all wait for the Supreme Court or the appellate courts to weigh in. So that's where we're going to be at with all this stuff. One last thing before I finish up this story, and this isn't directly connected to the South Carolina thing. There is a website that all of you are going to love that just went up this week. It is called illegalposter.com. illegalposter.com. Check it out right now. Basically, this anonymous person in Texas said, listen, there's a chance our appellate court will say it's legal to put the Ten Commandments posters in schools. And if they do, well, the rule only says it has to be a certain size poster and the text of the Ten Commandments has to be legible and visible. So this person made their own awesome versions of it. I love these. They got rainbow versions of the Ten Commandments formatted however the hell you want it to be formatted. It's just a block of text, so all you really see is the rainbow of colors. I love that. There's also this version right here, Prism and Chevron posters. I think that's just for the trans community. I'm not sure if that represents a different group as well, but you could see the chevron right there, also with the rainbow colors. Beautiful if you're interested in malicious compliance. There's also this version that has the Ten Commandments, but it includes that disclaimer at the bottom. This poster is illegal. So we did all the stuff we had to do, but down here it includes an additional message that says you shouldn't have to be doing this. So illegalposter.com. I reached out to the person who made it. I'm like, who are you? And they're like, not telling you. But kudos to this person for making illegalposter.com. And sadly, that website may be useful if the appellate courts rule in favor of these Ten Commandments laws. All right, I will pause there for this story. I got one more for you. What other questions we got here, though? Oh, if we look up the site, will it show up in a Google search? Yes. Illegalposter.com. Shout out to my friend Chaz Stevens, who has also made his own malicious compliance posters uh, separately. Ooh, I love these. As a Texan, I can donate these. And as the law says in many of these states, if you donate posters to any school district, they have to accept them. I am so sick of this shit. I agree with you. Also, welcome to our lives under Trump, under Republican rule. I know it's constant. It's constant. It never stops. All the stuff they do, none of it is helpful. All of it is stupid. Um, I don't know, man. I tried to tell people not to vote for him. It's frustrating, I know. But one thing I will say about when everything sucks around you, you do find people who are doing really amazing things and pushing back in ways that are really exciting and motivating and inspiring. Like watching protesters go up against ICE, that is courageous and badass. And when you see No Kings rallies and all these people showing up and people who are not political, who are like, I need to be political. There was a viral video the other day of some wrestling match, and I have no idea who's wrestling or what the context of that fight is. And you can hear people cheering like fuck ICE in the background. It's like, yes, we've reached normies too. That is amazing. I just hope that stays around during midterms and the next elections and all that. I thought that America was always diverse. That was one of the reasons for the founding of the USA, that it was freedom of choice. That was the reason they left their homelands. You are absolutely right about all of this. I don't know if there's a part two to that. I mean, you are right. Unfortunately, we are now run by a lot of people who really hate all the stuff about America that actually makes it exciting to live in. Teacher, what is coveting my neighbor's wife is a question some kindergartner who can read is one day going to ask their teachers. And if you answer it correctly, you are now indoctrinating the kid. How do you answer that without describing it? Teacher, why does my president constantly bear false witness? It is wild that Donald Trump is the Christian savior and he openly brags about breaking every commandment all the time. Did you see that he was like, people say, I forgot who he was referring to, but saying that he hasn't read the Bible. Donald Trump said, people say I haven't read the Bible, but whatever, they still love me here, even though he sells the Bible, even though he once said his favorite book is the Bible. Like, come on, at some point, some of these Christians have to figure out he's lying to them, right? Is there a way to pin videos on the YouTube page? I would totally watch the origin story video. Ooh, it might be good for all newish folks like me to see. There's two things about this. Yes, I can post some videos to the front of my YouTube page, but also every video I have made from like yesterday and before that, I'm totally embarrassed by. Just like every article I've ever written before yesterday, I hate. It's like looking at an old picture of yourself. It's never good. And so part of me doesn't want to do it because I'm like, why was I doing whatever the hell I was doing? So I don't want you to see the old videos. But if you're very curious, you can go on the YouTube page you are watching this on right now, and you can sort by old. You can sort by the recency and go back to what the oldest videos on this page were, and they're not great. You can also go to the Atheist Voice channel, which is still up, which I used to do, which has a lot of origin story type of videos too. All right, I got one more story for y'all. Okay. Let me show you a map of the border between Utah and Arizona right here. And if you check this out on Google Maps, I'm going to just zoom in. We're going to go right here. Utah is right there. We got Arizona right here. And if you scoot in here, we got a couple things going on that are really interesting. One is if you've never been here, I think you could see my mouse, right? Uh, Zion National Park, for my money, may be one of the most beautiful places in the country, but beautiful national park. I love hiking there. It's amazing. But that's not what I want to show you. That's just a free advertisement for Zion. But if you go down right over here, right at the border, you see this place right there, Hilldale in Utah and Colorado City in Arizona. So these are border cities, super small area right there. Like I'm zooming in a lot. And those two cities are really interesting because for decades, for a couple of decades, that little area right there on the border of each of those states is where a cult formed its base. And the cult was called the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it was run by this dude right over there. His name was Warren Jeffs. And if you just go to the Wikipedia page for Warren Jeffs, you find more than enough if you want to know about him. Here's what it says on Wikipedia. Warren Jeffs is an American cult leader and convicted child sex offender. He's the president of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's basically Mormon, but we're really into polygamy. And also, we're going to control your entire life, which I will say, the last part of that, not entirely different from the Mormon Church. But the Mormon Church, as you know it, is very much like we are not into the polygamy thing anymore. This Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, run by Warren Jeffs, was like, no, we're all doing polygamy here, and I get to be the king of all polygamists. And you could see in the highlighted part, he is serving a life sentence in Texas for sexual assault of a child following 2 convictions in 2011. And I just want to show you in the biographical section right here, his spouse. He has 78 spouses. 78 wives, this guy. Also, how many children does he have? More than 60. As someone with 2, that's a lot. So that's Warren Jeffs. He's the guy that ran this cult. And after he was arrested and people really found out about this dude, and he was in the news a lot when all this was going on, there were like, you can find the Lifetime movie about his cult. I'm pretty sure there's got to be like a Netflix true crime, something or another about it. But people have talked about the FLDS cult for a long time. But here's the thing. Warren Jeffs was running this thing, but eventually people speak out about what he's doing. Not only is he controlling their lives, he's going after children. Like, it's one thing to say polygamy is part of my religious beliefs, but like sexual assault of a child? No. At that point, federal law enforcement can come after you. And after he got arrested and he disappeared and the cult leader went away, what do all the rest of the people do who live in that area? Because they live in a very out of the way place and they had their own little like enclave right there. What do you do when the head leader goes away? Well, some people dispersed, but really, this is amazing. Check this out. This is from a Rolling Stone article about all of this. Church leaders founded a housing trust to administer what they saw as God's land. Basically, the church said, okay, well, all this land is communal. We all have it. But when members left the faith, the church kept their property, becoming land rich, even though people started moving away out of that area. In 2005, the state of Utah stepped in, appointed an outside fiduciary to manage trust assets, basically to stay in their homes. The trust, which has been managed since 2015 by a local board of largely ex-FLDS trustees, requires residents to pay property taxes, sign an occupancy agreement, and pay a little bit of money. But the church has refused to cooperate, saying it violates their religious beliefs to work with apostates. In response, the trust began evictions, and FLDS began flocking out of the community, which is a long way of saying after Warren Jeffs was arrested and he's in jail, state officials, and I think federal officials in some capacity, they said, we control this area now, and we will give it back to you for secular reasons. If you're paying your whatever mortgage, if you really own this property, okay. But the church no longer owns this. We're taking over this property. And the other thing that is really interesting is that the hardcore devotees of this cult, they start to leave, yes. But more importantly, non-members of the cult start moving in. Why would they start moving in? Because it is a beautiful area. I'm telling you, if you've never visited that part of Utah, Arizona, it's gorgeous. Mountains everywhere. The weather is nice. I can understand why people want to do that. And again, I'm very much skipping over all the details of how the government took over this land. How does that happen? The answer is I don't know all the details and I didn't bother to look it up. But the government took over this land, started giving it back to the people in a legal, secular way. The thing you got to know is the cult no longer owned and controlled all of this land. So that's what's interesting about this particular group. And I say all that because the Associated Press ran a really amazing article this past week talking about what has happened to these two cities since the FLDS cult basically disappeared. And there are so many things going on in this art. Look at this. Look at how beautiful that looks. I live in cold places. I want to go there right now. Anyway, there are some really interesting things here I wanted to share with you. One is some former members say this. Things got worse after Warren Jeffs took charge following his father's death in 2022. Families were broken apart by church leaders who cast out men deemed unworthy and reassigned their wives and children to others as if they're trading cards or something. On Jeff's orders, children were pulled from public school. Basketball hoops were taken down. Followers were told how to spend their time and what to eat. Like I said, it's a cult. He ran it like a cult, and then he got arrested. But after he gets arrested, check this out. Even years after his arrest, federal prosecutors accused the towns of being run as an arm of the church. The police were run by the church, and they denied non-followers basic services such as building permits, water hookups, police protection. And it was in 2017 that the court placed these towns under supervision, excising the church from their governments and shared police department. Separately, supervision of a trust that controlled the state's church's real estate was turned over to a community board, which has been selling it. So after 90 years of a theocracy, they had to figure out how to run their cities like cities, which is an amazing thing to have happen. How do you deprogram it? Well, one answer is this lady became the mayor. They had a lady become mayor. That's not a thing Warren Jeffs would have allowed. Also, this is interesting. Practicing FLDS members are now believed to account for only a small percentage of the town's population, which means secular people are moving in and they're not beholden to the religious rules that used to be there. What else do they have? People with no FLDS connections have also been moving in. Check this out. Gabby Olson, who grew up in Salt Lake City, first came to the towns in 2016 as an intern for a climbing and canyoneering guide service. She was drawn to the mountains and canyons, clean air, and 300 days of sunshine each year. And you see that picture and you're like, I get it. I have no interest in climbing mountains or canyoneering, but also right now I will do anything if that's where it takes me. This is just amusing. When you tell people, hey, we're getting married in Hilldale, they kind of chuckle because they just really don't know what it's about, said her husband, Dion Obermeyer, who runs the service with her. But of course, when they all came down here, they're all quite surprised. And you're like, oh yeah, there's a winery. There's a winery. This place where men could not drink alcohol even if they wanted to, now has a winery because it's like a normal city. And the piece closed with this quotation from one of the women who was married to Warren Jeffs, now 40 and remarried with a child, Brielle Decker, who was 18, it says in the paragraph above. She was 18 when she became Warren Jeffs' 65th wife. She thinks it'll take several generations to recover from the FLDS's abuses under Jeffs. I do think they can, but it's going to take a while because so many people are in denial. Still, they want to blame somebody. They don't really want to take accountability. I just wanted to share that because I thought just a really interesting article for one. The pictures are gorgeous. That's an article by Jacques Billeaud, Billeaud. I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but a great article. But also it just shows like a cult can take over an entire community. But when the leader gets arrested, leaves, or the whole thing falls apart, now you have to grapple with that difficulty of becoming a real city again, or cities in this case. And they're doing it. Like it took a long time to get there, but it's like a normal small town in one of the most beautiful parts of the country. And people are going to school and they're having normal lives and they're doing things outside of school and outside of their homes. Like they're actually building a real community that is not run entirely by religion. Like that is, it's optimistic. It's very cool that they've been able to overcome it that way. And it's just cool to see that so many of the people named in the article, including that mayor, by the way, they kind of all still share a lot of the same names because it's a very insular group of people, but they're trying to go past the FLDS. So it's a story of people breaking away from a religious cult, trying to make a secular government work. I think when that mayor, one of the interesting things in that story, when that woman became the mayor of, I think, Hilldale, I want to make sure I got that right. When she became the mayor, yes, of Hilldale, Donia Jessup, because she was a lady, all the FLDS men who were still on like the board of directors or the governance of that city, they were all like, we're all quitting. And she was left, this woman who doesn't know how to run a city. She did it because she felt like she had to, but she doesn't have experience. She had to pick up the pieces from there and learn how to be a mayor because all these men, part of the cult, they all walked out. They didn't want to be part of any leadership that involved a woman at the top of the pyramid. And because they left, normies got voted in eventually, and they actually have a functioning government now. So just, it was just an amazing article. I love it. Check it out. I'll put the link below. What questions we got here? Those two first names rule wins again. Yeah, all the serial killers / cults always get the two first names. I mean, why do they always go by the two first names? So you are less likely to get them confused with people who share their first and last name. But yeah, whenever they have the two first names too, Warren Jeffs, it's like, I have questions. God, it would, who else would, Mark Wayne Mullins? God, it would be like Children of the Corn. Used to be, might be, but the children seem like they're in better hands now. I'm kind of stuck on 78 wives and only 60 kids. Yeah, and you know some of those wives had more than one. I don't know what's going on there. It's hard for a guy to keep up. Yeah, I wonder if he saw that as a mistake for some of the wives, or were they too young for him to have kids with them? I don't know what the answer is to that. All right, we are good. Like I said at the beginning, next week I will be back on Wednesday night. Hopefully I will see you then. Thank you so much. Thank you to Den for helping with moderation. Remember to all of you, you could support this show by going to patreon.com/Hemant. You can go to friendlyatheist.com for all the articles. And I think that's it. I will see you next week. Have a good one.